A map of the Sahel appears in a soft blue glow, silent, motionless, almost fragile. For a moment, it feels like nothing is changing. But then, slowly, 3 lines of light begin to pulse across its surface. From the north, a pale beam descends from Algeria, steady, familiar, shaped by decades of proximity and dialogue. From the east, a deeper red arc stretches from China, deliberate, infrastructural, carved by the logic of long-term strategy. And from the northeast, a golden sweep from the Gulf curves toward the desert, fast, sharp, carrying the weight of capital and ambition. The 3 lines do not collide, they do not follow the same path, but they converge, right at the heart of the Sahel. A region once mapped by others now finds itself illuminated by competing visions. No explosions, no armies, only quiet pressure, drawn in light. Because in the Sahel, influence does not arrive with noise, it arrives with design. Stay with this map, because the lines you see are not as still as they seem. The Sahel is not shaped by a single power anymore. It is shaped by 3 currents moving at different speeds, guided by different philosophies and reaching for different outcomes. Each current views the region not as a void, but as a crossroads. A junction where diplomacy, security, and economic ambition are tested against a shifting landscape. To understand the Sahel today, one must understand the 3 visions pressing upon it. From the north comes Algeria, not with grand announcements nor sweeping financial packages, but with the weight of history. Algeria's model is rooted in geography itself, a neighbor who cannot ignore the fate of the Sahel because instability in Mali or Niger does not remain confined by borders. It drifts northward, carried by tribes, trade routes, and the winds of the Sahara. For decades, Algeria played the mediator's role. It brokered dialogues in Bamako, hosted peace talks, and positioned itself as the arbiter between factions. Its strength lies not in wealth, but in understanding the ethnic mosaics, the nomadic tensions, the fragile balance between central governments and peripheral communities. But this model faces new strain. The emergence of the Alliance of Sahel States and the assertive diplomacy of younger leaders challenges Algeria's traditional standing. The diplomatic rift of 2025, sparked by the downing of a drone and accusations traded across borders, is more than a dispute. It is a signal that the old architecture of influence is bending. From the northeast, another force arcs toward the Sahel. The Gulf states, led most visibly by the United Arab Emirates. Their model is fast, pragmatic, and relentlessly commercial. Where Algeria offers dialogue, the UAE offers infrastructure. Where older partners send advisors, the UAE sends investment teams. Ports, air hubs, free trade zones, security equipment, all delivered with a speed few partners can rival. The Gulf approach blends 3 elements: capital, logistics, and selective security. It does not seek to reshape Sahelian politics, only to access the corridors that will define future trade between Africa, the Gulf, and beyond. The vision is clear: a Gulf-Sahel axis that bypasses traditional European routes and taps directly into the mineral-rich interior of West Africa. This model's strength is flexibility. Its weakness is depth. It builds connections quickly, but does not anchor them with the same long-term systemic approach that characterizes China. Its influence shines brightly, but perhaps not as far into the future. From the east rises the most structured of the 3 visions, China's. Where the Gulf seeks corridors and Algeria seeks stability, China seeks architecture. Infrastructure is its language. Mining concessions are its vocabulary. Logistics networks are the sentences through which policy becomes reality. Chinese planners think in cycles measured not in years but in decades. A rail line is not simply transportation, it is a spine for future industrial zones. A power station is not a utility, it is the precondition for manufacturing clusters. A road to a mine is not a convenience, it is the first step in a supply chain that may stretch from the Sahel to factories thousands of kilometers away. This model is not loud, but it is immense. It does not declare alliances, it builds dependencies of function rather than allegiance. And because it does not intervene directly in internal political disputes, unlike Russia, or attach governance conditions. Unlike some Western partners, its presence can expand with minimal ideological friction, but it is not without friction. The Sahel's insecurity threatens project timelines. Regional realignments complicate negotiation. The Gulf's rising influence introduces competition in logistics, and Algeria views any narrowing of its regional relevance as a strategic concern. Yet China continues, patiently, systemically, because the Sahel offers both resources and geographic leverage. It is a region that can connect the Atlantic to the Red Sea, the Sahara to the Gulf of Guinea, and Africa's mineral belt to global supply chains. Algeria speaks the language of proximity. The UAE speaks the language of speed. China speaks the language of scale. Together, they form a triad of influence unique in Africa, a contest not of armies, but of frameworks, not of ideology, but of direction. Each model offers something the Sahel wants. Each model demands something the Sahel must question, and all three now converge across the same fragile map, illuminating the region with beams that reflect both opportunity and pressure. Three visions converge, but none share the same future. For decades, the Sahel moved according to forces outside its command. Maps were drawn for it, policies were drafted above it, alliances were negotiated around it, and its governments, fragmented and pressured, often responded more than they initiated. But the ground has shifted, not violently, not suddenly, but steadily. In the last 5 years, a new political posture has emerged across the region, a refusal to continue as a passive recipient of other people's strategies. The Sahel is no longer the object, it is becoming the negotiator. This shift can be seen most clearly through the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, a political and security bloc that broke away from ECOWAS with a message that startled observers. The Sahel would define its own trajectory, not be folded into frameworks that no longer reflect its reality. This is the foundation of what analysts now call Sahel diplomacy. It is not the diplomacy of handshakes and ceremonial agreements. It is the diplomacy of leverage, of placing powers in competition and using the resulting tension to extract better terms, a tactic long used by major states but only recently mastered by Sahelian capitals, where once the region aligned itself almost automatically with a single external partner, now it triangulates. Security discussions with one actor are paired with infrastructure negotiations with another and trade agreements with a third. Partnerships are now modular, not permanent, not exclusive, and not ideologically fixed. Take the case of Niger and Mali. Both have, in different ways, repositioned themselves to maximize bargaining power, opening channels with the Gulf when investment is needed, with China when long-term infrastructure is the priority, and with Russia when military stabilization is required. This is not randomness, it is calibration. Burkina Faso too embodies this new posture. Its leadership speaks openly of sovereign paths, diversified partnerships, and a break from inherited systems that once defined West African geopolitics. Across ministries and military councils, a single principle reappears: no unilateral dependence. This approach transforms the diplomatic field entirely. Algeria, once the uncontested northern stabilizer, now finds that Sahelian states engage it on more equal footing. Dialogue is welcomed, but no longer treated as indispensable. The drone incident of 2025, which sparked one of the most serious diplomatic rifts in years, shows that Sahelian governments no longer avoid confrontation when core interests are at stake. The Gulf, accustomed to rapid influence through capital, must now negotiate with governments who recognize the value of their geography, governments who know that a corridor gains legitimacy only when the state it crosses cooperates. And China, long comfortable offering infrastructure packages that partner nations gratefully accepted, now faces sharper negotiation. The Sahel demands more transparency, more local value addition, more protection from long-term vulnerability. This new political assertiveness marks a historic turn. For the first time, Sahelian states can choose not only who they work with, but how. The presence of multiple external powers has not weakened the region, it has given it options, and options are power. Yet this empowerment is fragile. It rests on confidence that must be continually reinforced. It relies on regional unity that can easily fracture. And it requires leaders who understand that sovereignty is not only declared, it must be managed, defended, and negotiated daily. Because leverage is a double-edged instrument. Use it wisely, and the Sahel gains infrastructure, trade, security, and diplomatic space it has never enjoyed before. Use it poorly, and external actors will exploit internal divisions, pulling states in different directions until the region loses the very agency it has begun to reclaim. This is why Sahel diplomacy is both a strategy and a test. It demands coherence across capitals that historically struggled to coordinate. It demands strategic patience in a region accustomed to reacting to crises. And it demands awareness that every partner, Algeria, the Gulf, China, sees the Sahel not only as a place to help, but as a place to shape. The region understands this now. It is learning to turn interest into advantage, attention into opportunity, but the learning curve is steep, and the stakes, political, economic, and human, are immense. The Sahel has stepped into the center of its own map. The question is whether it can stay there, but leverage cuts both ways, and every choice carries a cost. On a map illuminated by three converging beams, it is easy to imagine harmony, a triangular balance, a shared purpose, a region rising through the cooperation of distant partners. But maps lie by omission. They show lines, not pressures. They show direction, not collision. Beneath the soft glow of those beams lies a far harsher truth. The Sahel has become a zone where strategic intentions grind against each other like shifting tectonic plates. For Algeria, the Sahel is not a distant frontier. It is the buffer that protects its southern flank. For decades, Algerian diplomacy acted as the region's stabilizing North Star, mediating conflicts, hosting negotiations, shaping transitions. Its influence was not loud but pervasive, a kind of political gravity that neighboring states recognized instinctively. But in recent years, especially after the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, that gravity has weakened. New governments, new alliances, and new priorities in Bamako, Niamey, and Burkina Faso have reduced Algeria's monopoly over regional mediation. Younger leaders view sovereignty not as inherited wisdom, but as an active project, a stance best embodied by Ibrahim Traoré, whose rhetoric challenges older diplomatic hierarchies directly. The 2025 drone incident, which ignited one of the sharpest diplomatic rifts in years, sent a blunt message. Sahelian states are no longer willing to comply with expectations formed in a different era. For Algeria, this was not merely a dispute. It was a warning that the landscape it once navigated with ease had shifted under its feet. If Algeria's dilemma is political, the Gulf-China tension is structural. The UAE's ambition in the Sahel focuses on what it does best, creating corridors, ports, air hubs, logistical systems. Its goal is a Gulf Sahel arc that funnels trade, minerals, and influence along routes it helps design and control. China, by contrast, seeks something deeper. It does not simply want corridors, it wants ecosystems, mines feeding roads, roads feeding factories, factories feeding export routes. Its model is linear on the surface, but circular in function. Infrastructure enabling extraction, extraction enabling industry, industry enabling long-term influence. These two visions inevitably meet, sometimes in cooperation, often in overlap, occasionally in contradiction. Where the UAE proposes a logistics hub, China proposes a processing zone. Where China builds a highway to a mining belt, the Gulf seeks rights to handle the output at a port. Each wants a stake in the same arteries and the same future pathways. Their competition remains polite, almost invisible to the public eye, but beneath the surface, it is one of the most consequential races of the decade. China's presence brings power stations, roads, bridges, industrial parks. But it also brings long contracts, resource concessions, and supply chain dependencies that can last generations. Sahelian governments welcome the infrastructure, but some worry about the price that may emerge later, not in currency, but in constraint. When Chinese workers withdrew from a major Nigerian energy corridor due to insecurity in 2025, it exposed a vulnerability Beijing cannot fully control. Projects without stability are promises without completion. At the same time, Sahelian societies question the balance of benefit. Mining agreements raise concerns about environmental strain. Loans raise concerns about fiscal room. Infrastructure raises concerns about ownership after the initial glow fades. This tension does not imply rejection, it implies scrutiny, sharper, more deliberate, more confident than in the past. As the region shifts, internal dynamics shift too. When multiple external powers court the Sahel, factions inside states see opportunity and conflict. Some favor Gulf investment for its speed. Others favor Chinese systems for their durability. Others trust Algeria's familiarity for its stability. This can empower governments or fracture them. It can build unity or expose divides long buried. The competition that strengthens the region externally can also destabilize it internally if not carefully managed. And this is the paradox of influence. Every external partner brings both leverage and weight. Too little influence and development stalls. Too much influence and sovereignty bends. Sahelian leaders now walk a narrow ridge between advantage and vulnerability, between empowerment and entanglement. The region's emerging diplomacy has turned the Sahel into a field of negotiation, but negotiation is only as strong as the stability that sustains it. Free powers project their visions across the map. Free models try to anchor themselves in the soil. Free futures, overlapping, incompatible, yet inseparable, converge across a region still carving its own identity. In this crowded arena, influence is never neutral. It always redraws something. On the surface, the Sahel looks divided, vast distances, fragmented states, shifting alliances. But beneath these divisions lies a deeper truth. Every major power touching the region is, in one form or another, reaching for the same set of arteries: security, infrastructure, resources, connectivity, 4 pillars, 1 crossroads. And the Sahel sits exactly where these pillars intersect. No external actor can operate in the Sahel without addressing the violent instability that scars its borders. More than half of all global terrorist incidents in 2025 occurred here, a staggering reality that forces every power, whether it wishes to or not, to engage the security question. Algeria approaches security through dialogue and border vigilance. The Gulf approaches it through equipment, partnerships, and rapid response arrangements. China approaches it indirectly through stabilization tied to infrastructure continuity. 3 methods, 3 doctrines, but 1 battlefield: the safety of workers, communities, and trade routes. Security is not a shared project, but it is a shared dependency. Whether it is a railway designed by Chinese engineers, an air hub negotiated by Gulf investors, or a cross-border monitoring post supported by Algeria, every project draws a line across the map, and lines reveal priorities. A Chinese-built road rarely points nowhere. It points to minerals, ports, or industrial clusters. A Gulf-funded airport rarely serves only tourism. It channels cargo, transit, and political leverage. An Algerian border corridor rarely concerns only trade. It concerns the stability of its entire southern perimeter. What seems like construction is, in truth, strategy poured into concrete. The Sahel's underground wealth, uranium, gold, manganese, and the wider mineral belt stretching into neighboring zones attracts every actor for different reasons. For China, supply chain certainty. For the Gulf, commercial opportunity. For Algeria, strategic insulation against instability next door. But whoever accesses resources must first secure routes, power, workforce, and diplomatic backing. Thus, the competition for resources becomes a competition for the supporting architecture, the systems that govern how extraction is done, who benefits, and who decides. The Sahel is no longer merely a vast belt of land. It is a hinge between the Maghreb and the Gulf of Guinea, between the Atlantic and the Red Sea. Whoever shapes connectivity here influences the movement of goods, energy, and geopolitical weight across half the continent. This is the heart of convergence. Even rivals need the same roads, the same stability, the same permissions from the same governments. And so, without intending to, the three powers often reinforce one another's footprints. A Gulf-funded port strengthens a Chinese export corridor. A Chinese rail line strengthens an Algerian trade ambition. An Algerian security initiative strengthens the viability of both. Competitors? Yes, but interdependent competitors, tied together by geography, opportunity, and necessity. It is here, in this unintended harmony, that the Sahel gains its new leverage, because when three powers need the same terrain, the terrain acquires value, and when a region understands that value, it can negotiate not as a frontier, but as a center. Yet even now, one truth remains elusive. Still, one question hangs in the air, unanswered. The intersection of the three powers gives the Sahel something it has rarely possessed: the ability to choose. Choice in partners, choice in financing, choice in security frameworks, choice in the kind of development that might define its next century. But choice in the Sahel is never a simple matter. For the first time in decades, Sahelian capitals negotiate from a position of comparative strength, not because they have suddenly become wealthy, but because others have recognized their value. Infrastructure proposals once stalled for lack of interest now arrive in clusters. Offers for mining concessions, energy corridors, and logistics hubs pour in at a pace that would have seemed impossible 10 years ago. Roads stretch into areas that once existed only as blank spaces on administrative maps. Border posts modernize. Energy grids expand. This is the promise. A region once treated as a margin could become a center, a hinge between continents, a corridor of trade, a frontier of new connectivity. With three external visions converging, Sahelian states can diversify their partnerships, demand better contract terms, reduce dependence on old frameworks, and develop a political posture grounded in sovereignty rather than inheritance. It is a rare moment, the kind history offers sparingly, but convergence is never without cost. The presence of multiple powers raises the stakes of internal politics. Competing offers can divide ministries, militaries, and public opinion. Elites may align with different partners for different reasons: economic, ideological, or personal, creating fractures that external powers can exploit. The regional balance can tilt quickly. A new corridor may strengthen one capital while weakening another. A mining concession may inflame local grievances. An external security partnership may provoke rival groups or neighboring states. In this landscape, even opportunity can become a pressure point. Because the Sahel does not only host influence, it absorbs it. Influence shapes narratives. Narratives shape decisions. Decisions shape the region's internal cohesion. And when three powers push from three directions, the center can stretch and sometimes tear. What the Sahel faces today is not new interference. It is a new density of interference. Each power wants something essential. Algeria wants stability on its southern flank. The Gulf wants corridors linking Africa to the Arabian Peninsula. China wants long-term supply chains anchored by infrastructure. None of these aims are inherently harmful. None are inherently benign. All carry trade-offs. The future depends on whether Sahelian leaders can turn convergence into coherence, not fragmentation. Whether they can transform interest into investment, investment into empowerment, and empowerment into sovereignty. This is the challenge of becoming a center. A center must hold. And yet, the map is shifting. The lines are tightening. The stakes are rising. Because the lines are crossing, and the center cannot stay still. For generations, the Sahel was defined by distance, a place where the world looked briefly during crisis, then looked away. A region mapped by outsiders, interpreted through statistics, reduced to headlines of conflict and hardship. That legacy has not vanished. It still shadows the present, a reminder of all the years when decisions about the Sahel were made far from its soil. Yet something has changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. The Sahel has stepped into its own horizon, Across Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, a new political vocabulary has taken root, one anchored in sovereignty, dignity, and the right to choose partners without permission. Leaders speak not of dependence, but of direction. And figures such as Ibrahim Traoré have become symbols of a generation unwilling to inherit limitations imposed by the past. This shift does not erase the risks. Three powers still converge on the same terrain. Their visions still overlap. Their ambitions still collide. The Sahel remains a corridor of opportunity and vulnerability in equal measure, but the difference now lies in agency. The region is no longer waiting for solutions to arrive from outside. It is negotiating, repositioning, recalibrating, testing the boundaries of multipolarity, and discovering its own leverage at the center of it. What emerges from this moment is not a finished picture, but an unfolding one, a map whose lines are still being drawn, not by a single hand, but by many, including the hands of those who live upon it. And perhaps this is the real turning point, not the presence of Algeria, the Gulf, or China, but the emergence of a Sahel that understands the value of its position and the weight of its choices. The region stands at a crossroads, yes, but also at an awakening. Read the map differently, because the center of tomorrow may not be where the world expects it.